Guys, at least 1 hour last night I had to spend in my corridor waiting for our air defense to destroy Russian drones that keep visiting Ukrainian cities, even those considered semi-safe. And my city is located just 80 kilometers from the EU border. According to our local reports, 2 Russian drones lost their way or maybe did that intentionally and crossed the border of Poland. But I was sitting in that corridor and I was not afraid. Maybe because I was very tired after my trip back home from Kyiv, but also because I understand with all these nightly attacks, Russia is losing. Russia started the process of its collapse on the very day their blitzkrieg failed. And many of you remember how on the night of the full-scale invasion, Putin announced 3 aims of his so-called special military operation. That is to denazify Ukraine, to demilitarize Ukraine, and to prevent us from entering any alliances like NATO. Of course, Putin is not afraid of NATO. Forget about this. This is total BS. We don't see NATO defending itself now against Russian drones and missiles, intentionally provoking, escalating, crossing their borders. But the only reason why Putin dislikes the idea of Ukraine or Georgia or other former Soviet republics in NATO is his understanding that he won't be able to continue invading and attacking us. If you want to know more about this topic, there is a separate video on the channel that I connect here. But today, during these extremely difficult days with lots of chaos in the international politics, with lots of longtime friends switching sides and shaking hands with Putin, another game played by the experienced FSB agents of Kremlin, I feel just as millions of Ukrainians that Russia, Putin are failing. And that no matter how hard they try to destroy us, we get stronger each day. It's difficult, it's painful, it's very, very, very hard sometimes, especially if you hear people like J.D. Vance speaking, but we are stronger than we were in 2022 or in 2014. And this is the country of what Russia is expected. You know that on this channel, I like to share more of my personal observations. We do not follow the news here, but we follow emotions and ideas. And I want to dedicate this video and perhaps the next one to this analysis of the Russian Putin's failures. And today we will focus on their problems and lost dreams in Ukraine. But there are a lot of problems they actually brought back to the Russian Federation, and that we will discuss in the next video. And subscribe to know more truth from Ukraine, and please share these videos to demonstrate your solidarity with us. This is super important, and I'm very grateful for all of your comments, likes, and shares. So let's begin with these aims that Vladimir Putin enumerated before the start of the full-scale invasion. And it is an invasion. It's not a Ukraine war. It's not a conflict. It's the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The language is very important in politics, especially in times of war. That is why one very interesting project will appear soon on this channel. Let me know in the comments below, after my brief introduction, do you have any ideas what that can be? I wonder, do you feel me? Do you feel what's coming? Because it will appear on the next week. And I feel like it is very much me in it. So hopefully you will like it. So Putin's aim number 1, to demilitarize Ukraine. First of all, back in 2014, when they tried to annex Crimea, when they invaded Donetsk, Luhansk regions using regular Russian army, Ukraine literally did not have any normal army. They kept demilitarizing us after 1991, together, unfortunately, with lots of European countries, with the United States. Ukraine lost its nuclear weapons, and most of our army inherited the traditions and rules of the Soviet army. And many of our generals studied together with the Russian generals, trained together against the West. So they could not imagine a war against the Russian army. And when they attacked in 2014, there was no army, literally. And what saved us is unbelievable bravery and patriotism of Ukrainian people who decided to protect the borders even though they were not military, they were not trained. And this phenomenon of Ukrainian volunteers, I don't know if there is a proper word in the English language. Let me know in the comments below because I need it. I often speak about that. But volunteer is used for people in very different contexts. You can be a volunteer helping in a canteen or at school or in the park. And in Ukraine, we have people whom we call dobrovolci. Actually, it can be translated as people of the goodwill. So we have volunteers, and we name volunteers those who collect money for drones, supply products, supply weapons, everything needed to the front lines, or help refugees. They are volunteers. But soldiers are dobrovolci, like people of the good will, but literally they are soldier volunteers, people who were not mobilized, not conscripted. The majority of them did not serve in the Ukrainian army, and they all went to protect our borders back in 2014. And that gave birth to the new armed forces of Ukraine. Then, during these next years, the number was growing, some positive changes were made, and people in the army, in the parliament realized that Russia is not just like an ideological competitor or a former empire that still wants to influence your media, but it is a real invader, a true danger. The Kremlin wants to recreate the USSR, and Lavrov speaks about that openly, wearing the USSR sweater on the meeting in Alaska, which was supposed to break the war and to start the negotiation process. Total BS. So now we have close to 1 million soldiers, experienced soldiers, and Ukrainian army is the best army in the world. No other, okay, maybe at least in Europe, let me keep it that way, but we have this active experience, modern war experience, not preparing ourselves for the 20th century war, but the 21st century war. It's very different. We know how to fight with robots. We know how to fight with drones. We know how to use AI. We use Starlink, a lot of things. And we develop weapons now in Ukraine. Drones, marine drones, missiles like Flamingo, like different kinds of Neptune, and strategies for the 21st century war. That is another very vivid reminder that NATO needs Ukraine. NATO needs Ukraine. So in future, after the victory, after the defeat of the Russian Federation, the majority of people in Ukraine want Ukraine to remain heavily militarized because unfortunately our imperial neighbors won't change. In Russia, every 20, every 50 years, they nurture a new dictator. That's why we have to be prepared and we have to safeguard Europe. We understand that and we are prepared to take the responsibility. We are fighting. Your task is just to back us up. That is the easiest, taking into account what kind of danger Russia, China, North Korea, Iran impose on the Western world. So Putin wanted to demilitarize Ukraine. Now we are super militarized. And not just with the support of allies, but from within. I believe our long-range missiles, our drone developments allow us, for example, to target Russian oil refineries without asking the permission from the White House. And that is Very important. So I was talking about people, I was talking about weapons, but also the skills, the strategies like spider web, like work inside the Russian RIA, neutralizing their war criminals. All of that is very valuable and an achievement because of this war. Then let's skip for a second the second name and focus on this neutral status. Putin does everything not to let Ukraine join NATO. Trump supports his idea because he knows nothing about NATO, about history, about geopolitics, but the only reason why Putin does not want Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova in NATO, because he understands it, he thought previously that it is too dangerous to attack a NATO country because of the response. He knew that NATO did not plan to attack him. He knows that, he sees that now. He sees the weakness, indecisiveness. He sees that like any Russian drone on the Polish, Romanian, Lithuanian territory or hybrid wars against Germany or Britain and the US are simply treated as provocations that must be ignored, not an escalation. I have never heard anyone speaking about the escalation from the Russian side, even when they invited North Korean soldiers. Why? Why is it so, I wonder? So, the only reason why Putin did not want Ukraine in NATO, because he knew he cannot attack NATO. It would be too dangerous. What I'm afraid now is that he saw the weakness and absence of unity inside NATO, with Hungary, with other countries having doubts about the support of Ukraine, and right now his task is to break NATO. He did not protest about Finland joining the alliance and actually Russian border doubling after Finland joined NATO. And that, by the way, was also inspired by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So his second epic fail. Not just he managed to make Ukraine neutral. I believe that he aided entrance of Finland and Sweden to NATO, but in case of troubles with NATO, a new alliance can actually shape around Ukraine. Or Ukraine will enter NATO because Trump is not forever. And let's skip some other sentiments and focus on the third one, which sounds very Russian style, denazify Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is an extremely tolerant and diverse country. We have a Jewish president, you know that, and we never talked about him being Jewish until Russia started blaming Ukraine for the things they do inside that country. It is Russian society that is super divided and constantly undermines other nationalities. And there are 190 inside the Russian Federation. It has a perfect potential to dissolve one beautiful day. The process has actually already started the day the full-scale invasion started and failed. The Blitzkrieg failed. They did not expect it would take so long. So, what is a Nazi from the Kremlin perspective? That is a person that does not identify as Russian. They want all former republics to speak Russian, think Russian, always prefer Russian and identify as Russian. That is why every Ukrainian, every Georgian, every Lithuanian, every Moldovan that says, well, I am Moldovan, I am Ukrainian, I want to pass my language from generation to generation. I protect our songs. I love our national costume, and I do not worship Russian. That is what makes you a Nazi, just if you don't want to be Russian. That is how the Kremlin classifies people. But once again, Ukraine has always been very tolerant, very understanding. And what they did, they converted a huge amount of people who were neutral towards Russia to be very anti-Russian. They tried to whitewash the invasion, saying they protect the Russian-speaking population. Well, first of all, these are people traumatized generations ago by an artificial Russification. That is not the natural process. It was caused by Holodomor, it was caused by forced migration, it was caused by lots of traumas, which made a lot of Ukrainians identify themselves as Russian because they thought that's the only way to survive. Otherwise, they will take you to Siberia or they will create another artificial genocide. So even though they managed to change somehow the identity of the regions, what do now? They destroy, they erase from the map the houses, the hospitals, and the schools exactly in these regions. Is that the way they protect Russian-speaking people? That's absurd. What they do is more and more people switch into Ukrainian. More and more people associating Russian not with Pushkin as they wanted, but with the language of torture, with the language of filtration camps, with the language of looters and rapists, because that is the most recent experience we have. Another thing that I understood on the very first day of the full-scale invasion, that we are all as one. You'd never feel that close with your countrymen until you realize that with those missiles, with those drones that travel literally everywhere, not seeing any difference between doctors, poets, small children, old people, hospitals, cafes, is that Russians want to kill you just because you are Ukrainian, not because you are military, not because you're a teacher, not because anything. You can be anything. They want to destroy you because you are a Ukrainian. Can you realize how united, how close, how loved you feel by the very same people who suffer from a similar danger? You can experience troubles in your countries. You can experience natural disasters. But here, all the country faces the same danger simultaneously, and that unites you stronger than ever before. More people realized they were doing the same during the Soviet times. They understood it was not just a part of the history, it was the reality of their families, of their generations. And they got super interested to discover the history, to find the truth, to find the roots, to learn more about their region, about their village, about their grandmother, to find the connection with the relatives. And that led to the boom of the Ukrainian culture, of the Ukrainian language, of the Ukrainian music, of the Ukrainian literature. What we experience right now is very strong culturally, emotionally. And that is contrary to what Putin wanted. So just this brief analysis of the situation leads us to the very obvious conclusion. No matter how hard they bomb us, they keep failing. They keep making us stronger. They keep making us more militarized, more Ukrainian, and an asset to any military alliance, be it NATO or something new. And that is the end for the Putin's regime, the end for the Russian Federation as we know it, and the end for the Russian imperial project. To witness that together, subscribe and please share these videos because many people still live in the fog of Russian disinformation. Also follow me on other social media, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Discord, Threads, all the links in the description of this video. Same as the link to our merch shop. We invite you to join the army of our ambassadors and remind people about Ukraine and the need to defeat Russia, defeat and demilitarize Russia. Thank you so much for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!